The gun was already aimed at the boy's head when Joy threw herself in front of it. No warning, no hesitation. Just $43 worth of exhaustion, a cast iron skillet, and a woman who had already lost too much to be afraid of losing anything else. The mercenary didn't even see her coming. Crack. Iron met bone. The gunman's wrist snapped sideways. The silenced pistol skidded across wet asphalt and vanished under the dumpster, and Joy Washington, $9 an hour waitress, stood over a professional killer with her chest heaving and her knuckles already bleeding. Then the second one stepped out of the shadows. Then the third. Joy didn't run. She pulled the 7-year-old boy behind her back, planted her feet on that cracked parking lot like she owned every inch of it, and raised the skillet again. "You want him," she said. "You come through me first." Nobody moved. Because here's what those mercenaries, in their expensive tactical gear, with their earpieces and their laser sights and their 6-figure contracts, didn't know about Joy Washington. She had buried her mother at 22. She had raised her brother alone on tips and overtime. She had fought the city, the landlord, the bank, and the system, and she was still standing. 3 armed men in the dark were honestly the least scary thing she'd faced all week. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, standing in that parking lot with blood on her hands and a terrified child gripping the back of her uniform, was whose son she had just saved. She didn't know that the boy's name was Cho Min-jun. She didn't know that his father's name made entire governments go quiet. She didn't know that by morning, that same father would have her full name, her home address, her brother's school schedule, and every debt she'd ever owed, not to threaten her, to repay her. But first, she had to survive the night. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you personally and see just how far this story has reached. Let's find out together. The gun was already pointed at the boy's head when Joy moved. Not walked. Not ran. Moved the way your body acts before your brain catches up, the way instinct overrides every sensible thought you've ever had about self-preservation. The cast iron skillet connected with the mercenary's forearm, with a sound like a baseball bat hitting a fence post. The gun skittered across the asphalt. The man stumbled. And Joy Washington, $9 an hour, 11 hours on her feet, $43 in crumpled tips, grabbed the boy by his tiny, suited shoulder and shoved him behind her back. "Don't move," she whispered to him. "Not 1 inch." Then she looked up. 3 men, all in black, all built like they ate other people's problems for breakfast. The one whose wrist she'd just cracked was already straightening up, rolling his shoulder like the pain was an inconvenience rather than an injury. He looked at her the way people look at something unexpected, a cockroach in a clean kitchen, a wrong turn on a familiar road, like she didn't belong in this situation, like she had made a very, very stupid mistake. "Lady," he said, his accent clipped and professional, "walk away. This doesn't concern you." Joy shifted her grip on the skillet. "He's 7 years old. Walk away." "I heard you the first time," she said. "I'm still standing here." The man tilted his head slightly, a small, cold gesture, and reached into his jacket. Joy swung first. What happened in the next 40 seconds would later be described by the parking lot's security camera, the footage of which mysteriously disappeared by morning as the most chaotic, improbable, and physically inadvisable thing a civilian had done in that zip code in living memory. Joy didn't win. Let's be honest about that. She was one exhausted woman with a kitchen utensil against 3 trained professionals. But she made enough noise, broke enough bones, and caused enough general chaos that when the restaurant's back door banged open and 2 busboys stumbled out for a smoke break, the mercenaries made a calculated decision. They melted back into the shadows and were gone before the busboys could process what they were seeing. Joy stood in the middle of the parking lot, breathing hard, skillet still raised, 1 shoe missing, her uniform torn at the shoulder. The boy was still pressed against the wall behind her. She turned to look at him. He was staring at her with the largest, most serious eyes she had ever seen on a child, dark and deep and old in a way that made her chest ache. His tiny suit was dusty at the knees. His bottom lip was trembling, but he was fighting it, clenching his jaw with a dignity that belonged on someone 4 times his age. Joy lowered the skillet slowly. "Hey," she said, softening her voice the way she did when her brother Marcus had nightmares. "Hey, you're okay. They're gone. You're okay." The boy looked at her for a long moment, Then, in a small, precise voice, he said, "You lost your shoe." Joy blinked, looked down at her feet. One white sneaker, one sock with a hole in the toe. Despite everything, despite the adrenaline and the bleeding knuckles, and the very real possibility that she had just made the worst decision of her life, Joy laughed. It came out short and startled, like it surprised her as much as it surprised him. "Yeah," she said. "I did." The ghost of something crossed the boy's face, not quite a smile, but close enough. "My name is Min Jun," he said. "Joy," she said. "You got a phone, Min Jun? Someone I can call to come get you?" He nodded once, reached into his jacket pocket, because of course a 7-year-old in a tailored suit had an inside pocket, and produced a phone so sleek and expensive it looked like it belonged in a museum display case. Joy dialed the only contact saved in it. The phone rang once, one single ring. Then a voice answered, low, measured, and carrying the particular quiet of a man who did not raise his voice because he had never needed to. "Min Jun." "This isn't Min Jun," Joy said. "My name is Joy Washington. I'm a waitress at the Golden Spoon on 5th and Morrow. Your son is safe. Some men tried to take him from the parking lot. They're gone now. You need to come get him." Silence. Not the silence of shock, not the silence of fear. The silence of someone very carefully deciding how to respond. "Are you injured, Miss Washington?" Joy looked at her bleeding knuckles. "I'm fine. Is my son injured?" "No, he's good. She glanced at Min Jun, who was watching her with those grave, ancient eyes. "He's very calm, actually. Calmer than me, if I'm being honest." Another pause. "Then stay where you are. Do not speak to anyone. Do not call the police." The line went dead. Joy stared at the phone. "Your dad's a real talker," she said. Min Jun looked up at her with complete seriousness. "He doesn't like the phone. Does he like anything?" The boy considered this with the gravity of a philosopher. "He likes his morning tea, and he likes when I do well in school." A pause. "He doesn't show it, but I can tell." Joy looked at this small, strange, composed child, this boy in a suit with sad eyes and a billionaire's phone and professional kidnappers in his parking lot, and felt something twist behind her sternum, something protective and furious and heartbroken all at once. "Come here," she said, and sat down on the curb next to him without caring about her uniform. "We'll wait together." They sat in the parking lot in the August heat, side by side, Joy with her one shoe and her skillet across her knees, and Min Jun with his hands folded neatly in his lap. 3 minutes passed, then 5. "Miss Joy," Min Jun said quietly. "Just Joy is fine." "Joy." He paused. "Thank you." She didn't say you're welcome. She just put her hand briefly over his small folded ones and said, "Nobody was getting through me, baby. Nobody." 2 black vehicles turned silently into the parking lot exactly 7 minutes after the call ended. By the next morning, Joy had almost convinced herself it was over. She'd given her account to the men who arrived with Yang Eun. Not police, not anyone with badges she recognized. Answered every question with her arms crossed and her jaw set. Refused the envelope of cash. One of them slid across the hood of the car and walked back into the Golden Spoon to finish her closing duties, like a woman who had not just dismantled a professional operation with cookware. The manager docked her for the broken skillet. Joy went home, wrapped her knuckles, ate cereal standing over the sink, and passed out on the couch still in her uniform. She slept for 4 hours before her brother Marcus shook her awake. "Joy." His voice was strange, tight. "Joy, wake up. Something's wrong." She was on her feet before she was fully conscious, years of being the one who handled everything, snapping her upright like a spring. "What? What happened?" Marcus was standing in the middle of their apartment, and he was looking at it the way you look at something that used to be familiar and suddenly isn't. Every drawer pulled out. Every cabinet open. Her mother's ceramic vase, the blue one, the one she'd saved from the house when everything else got sold, in pieces on the kitchen floor. Someone had been inside. Joy stood very still. She crossed to the kitchen drawer, reached past the empty space where her emergency cash had been folded under the dish towels, and picked up her phone. She opened her banking app. Account balance, $0. A pending notice from the bank. Account flagged for review. Access temporarily suspended. Joy. Marcus's voice cracked. He was 20 years old and trying not to show her how scared he was, and the effort of it broke her heart. "What's going on? Who did this?" Joy set the phone down on the counter, very carefully, like she was handling something explosive. She thought about the men in the parking lot, the one who had looked at her like she was an inconvenience. She thought about the way they had moved, professional, clean, invisible. She thought about the fact that they hadn't come back for Minjin last. They'd come back for something else. They'd come back to send a message. You saw something you shouldn't have. Now you have nothing. Walk away. Joy looked at the blue ceramic pieces on the floor. Her mother had bought that vase from a church sale when Joy was 9, had kept it on the kitchen windowsill for 16 years, through eviction notices and hospital bills and every kind of hard. Joy had carried it out of the house herself the day the bank took everything, wrapped in a dish towel, pressed to her chest like it was alive. She bent down and picked up the largest piece. Her hand was steady. "Pack a bag," she said quietly. "Joy." "Marcus." She looked up at him. "Pack a bag, just enough few days, and call Aunt Renee and tell her you're staying with her until I say different. I'm not leaving you alone. I'm not asking." Her voice was soft, but it was the softness of a closed door, not an open one. "Please, do this for me." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. This boy she'd raised, this kid she'd fought every system in the city to protect. And then he nodded once and went to his room. Joy stood in the wreckage of her kitchen and thought about her next move. She had no money, no safety net. Her job, she would discover 2 hours later when she called to check her shift schedule, had been restructured. Her position eliminated, effective immediately, with a vague reference to performance issues that didn't match a single review she'd ever received. By noon, the community center had received a notice from the city citing safety violations requiring immediate inspection and temporary closure. By 3 in the afternoon, Joy understood. This wasn't a warning. This was a demolition. They weren't trying to scare her. They were erasing her, piece by piece, quietly, efficiently, the way professionals remove obstacles. No fingerprints, no confrontation, just the steady, silent dismantling of everything she had worked for, until there was nothing left to fight with and nowhere left to stand. Joy sat on the curb outside the community center and looked at the closure notice on the door. An elderly man named Mr. Deacon, 73, came to the center every Tuesday for the chess club Joy's father had started 20 years ago, shuffled up beside her and looked at the notice. "They finally got to it," he said, not surprised, just weary. "Not permanently," Joy said. Mr. Deacon looked at her sideways. "You sure about that, baby girl?" Joy looked at the closure notice for a long moment. "No," she said honestly, "but I'm saying it anyway." Mr. Deacon was quiet. Then he reached into his coat pocket and produced a slightly crushed pack of butterscotch candies, the same ones he'd been carrying since Joy was 8 years old, and held one out to her without a word. She took it. They sat on the curb together in the afternoon heat, an old man and a broke, jobless, homeless adjacent woman sharing butterscotch candy in front of a locked door. "Your father would have had something to say about all this," Mr. Deacon said eventually. Joy unwrapped her candy. "Yeah," she paused. "What do you think he'd say?" Mr. Deacon thought about it seriously. Something that sounded wise but was mostly just stubborn. Joy smiled despite herself. That's exactly what he would have said. Mr. Deacon stood up slowly, joints protesting. "You be careful, Joy, whatever you got yourself into. These aren't people who play by any rules, you know." He shuffled off down the sidewalk. Joy held the butterscotch candy on her tongue and stared at the closed door of the center and thought, "I know." The question was what she was going to do about it. The answer came for her before she had time to find it herself. It was raining by the time Joy cut through the alley on DeKalb Street. Not because it was a shortcut, but because the main road meant passing 3 places that now felt hostile, and she needed a route that required no explanation and no small talk and no pretending she was fine. The alley was narrow and badly lit, smelling of wet concrete and old food, and Joy moved through it with her hood up and her eyes forward. She heard the footsteps when she was halfway through, measured, deliberate. Not the random steps of someone also cutting through, someone behind her, matching her pace exactly. Joy didn't run. Running told them they'd frightened you. Running told them they had the power. She kept walking, but her hand found the small canister of pepper spray on her keychain, the one luxury she'd bought herself 3 years ago after a bad shift, and she wrapped her fingers around it. The footsteps sped up. Joy spun around. The man coming at her was not large. That was the first thing she registered. Not the wall of muscle type. He was lean and precise-looking, dressed in dark clothes that disappeared into the rain, and he was closer than she expected, already within arm's reach, and his hand was coming up. Something moved in her peripheral vision. Fast, decisive. A presence that appeared from the edge of the alley wall, like it had simply materialized from the dark. And then the man reaching for Joy was no longer reaching for Joy. He was face first against the brick wall with his arm twisted up behind his back at an angle that made Joy's teeth clench. And the person holding him there was tall, lean, a charcoal suit jacket darkening at the shoulders from the rain. A face that Joy had never seen before, but recognized immediately from the only contact on Minjun's phone. Not from a photograph, from the voice, from the silence that surrounded him like a physical thing. Cho Yang-un looked at the man pinned against the wall with the expression of someone reviewing a disappointing quarterly report. He said something in Korean, low, short, just a few words. The man whimpered. Yang-un released him. The man dropped, scrambled to his feet, and was gone down the alley before Joy could track his movement. Silence settled back over the rain. Yang-un turned to look at Joy. Up close, he was not what she'd expected. She'd expected something louder. A man who wore his power on the surface, who made sure you knew it immediately. Instead, he was almost understated. The suit was immaculate. His posture was the kind that didn't come from posturing. It came from someone who had been through enough that they no longer needed to perform confidence. His face was still, composed, with the kind of careful neutrality that she recognized from people who had learned to keep their expressions as collateral. His eyes were different from his face. His eyes were sharp, alert. And in this moment, studying her with an attention so focused it felt almost physical, like being seen by something that missed nothing. "Miss Washington," he said. His English was precise and unhurried. Joy stared at him. "You've got to be kidding me," she said. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but the acknowledgement of one. "I assure you I am not. I gave your people my statement last night. I didn't ask for anything. I refused the money." Joy squared her shoulders, rain soaking into her collar. "I want my apartment put back the way it was. I want my bank account unfrozen. I want my job back. Actually, forget the job. They docked me for the skillet. I don't want it back. I want my community center reopened. And I want whoever is responsible for this to understand that I am not afraid of them." She stopped. Yang-un had not moved, had not blinked or shifted or reacted to any of it. "Are you finished?" he asked. "No," she pointed at him. "Your people did this to me, because I helped your son, so if you're any kind of man at all, you're going to fix it." A long pause. The rain came down between them. "You're right," Yang-un said. Joy blinked. She had not expected that. "The men who targeted my son last night are not affiliated with me," he continued. "They are affiliated with people who want something I have. By protecting Minjun, you became visible to them. Everything that happened to you today was their work, not mine." He paused. "I am here because they sent someone to make certain you stayed silent permanently, as you have just witnessed." Joy processed this. "So I saved your son," she said slowly, "and as a thank you, I now have professional criminals trying to permanently silence me." "Yes, that is a terrible outcome." "Yes, and you want what? You want me to just disappear quietly and hope they stop coming? No." Yang-un reached into his jacket and produced something, a phone, different from the one Minjun had, smaller, matte black. He held it out. "I want to offer you protection, proper protection. Not an envelope of cash, not a car service, my protection." Joy looked at the phone. She did not take it. "Why?" she said. "Why not just handle this yourself and leave me out of it?" "Because," Yang-un said, and for the first time something shifted behind those careful eyes. Something that was not calculation, not strategy, but something older and less armored. "My son has not stopped asking about you since last night. He told me that you held his hand while you waited, that you didn't make him feel like a burden." Joy said nothing. "Minjun is..." Yang-un paused, choosing his words the way you choose tools, precisely. "He does not trust people easily. His life has not given him much reason to. He trusted you in 40 minutes. Another pause. "I would like to know what kind of person earns that." The rain was getting heavier. Joy looked at this man, this cold, composed, dangerous man who had just dispatched a professional in a dark alley and was now standing in the rain talking to her about his son's feelings, and she felt the ground shifting under her feet. She had spent her whole life not trusting people with power. Every landlord who had smiled before raising the rent. Every city official who had promised and pivoted. Every person who had looked at her neighborhood and seen an investment opportunity instead of a community. Her gut said, don't. Her gut said, these people always want something. Her gut said, you will be the one who pays in the end. But her brain said, the man in this alley just saved your life. And somewhere deeper than either of those, in the place where she kept the things she didn't say out loud, something said, that boy held your hand too. Joy reached out and took the phone. I have conditions, she said. Yang waited. My brother stays out of this, completely. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't go anywhere near any of this. She held up one finger. The community center reopens. Whatever strings you have to pull, you pull them, and you make it clean. No dirty money in the building, no strings attached to the community. 2 fingers. And you tell me the truth. All of it. Who these people are, what they want, why your son was in a diner parking lot without a full security detail at 10 o'clock at night. That last one landed. Yang Yun's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That last one, he said carefully, is complicated. I have time. A very long pause. The rain drummed the pavement between them. Minjin wanted to see the city, Yang Yun said finally. Without guards, without the motorcade. He asked me if we could just drive, like a normal father and son. Just drive and stop somewhere for food. He stopped. I could not say no to him. Joy looked at him. There it was. Underneath all of it, the charcoal suits and the cold eyes and the silence that filled rooms, there was a father who had made a vulnerable decision because his son had asked him for something ordinary. She understood that more than she wanted to. Okay, she said. She pressed the phone into her coat pocket. But I'm not moving into your house, she added. And I'm not wearing a wire or learning to shoot anyone or doing anything that requires me to sign something. We're clear on that. Yang Yun looked at her with that unreadable expression. You held off 3 armed men with a frying pan, he said. I would not presume to tell you what you are not capable of. It was a skillet, Joy said. There's a difference. And there, barely, just for a fraction of a second, Cho Yang-yun almost smiled. Come, he said. My car is at the end of the alley. I will explain everything. Joy fell into step beside him. The rain came down around them, cold and indifferent, washing the alley clean. Somewhere across the city, people who had bet their fortune on Joy Washington having nothing left to fight with were about to discover they had made a very serious miscalculation. Because Joy Washington had just found something more dangerous than money, more reliable than luck, and more permanent than fear. She had found someone who owed her, and she intended to collect. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you personally and see just how far this story has traveled. Every single comment means the world. Let's find out together how far we can go. The gate was the first thing that told Joy she had made a terrible mistake. Not terrible like dangerous, terrible like irreversible. The kind of mistake that looks reasonable at every individual step and only reveals itself as a mistake when you're already through the door and the door has closed behind you. The gate was black iron, 14 feet tall, set into a stone wall that ran the length of the block. 2 men in dark suits stood on either side of it with the particular stillness of people trained never to look like they were watching, but always watching. Security cameras tracked the car's approach with the subtle rotation of something that never slept. Joy sat in the back seat of Yang Eun's car and looked at all of this and said nothing. Marcus, beside her, let out a low breath. Joy, he said quietly. Don't, she said. I know what you're going to say. Do you? Yes, you're going to say this was a terrible idea. Marcus looked at the gate, looked at the men, looked at the stone wall. I was going to say the gate is bigger than our whole building. He paused. But also, yes, terrible idea. The gate opened without a sound. The inside of Yang Eun's estate was the kind of beautiful that made Joy deeply uncomfortable. Not because it was excessive, but because it was restrained. No gold fixtures, no chandeliers dripping with crystal. Just clean, severe lines, dark wood, enormous windows that looked out over a private garden, and the kind of silence that only existed in places where every inconvenient sound had been professionally removed. A woman named Mrs. Park met them at the entrance. Small, 60s, silver-haired, with a posture that suggested she had managed far more complicated situations than 2 Black Americans with 1 duffel bag between them. She bowed slightly and gestured them inside with the practiced grace of someone who had been doing this for 30 years. Mr. Cho has arranged rooms on the east wing, she said. I will show you. Dinner is at 7. Mr. Cho keeps a formal table. Joy and Marcus followed her through a corridor that was longer than their entire apartment. Marcus leaned toward Joy. A formal table, he whispered. I heard her. Joy, we eat standing over the sink. Marcus, I swear. I'm just saying maybe warn me next time before you accept dinner invitations from. I did not accept a dinner invitation. I accepted protection from people who are actively trying to. Joy caught Mrs. Park glancing back at them and lowered her voice to almost nothing. We'll talk about this later. Mrs. Park opened a door at the end of the corridor and stepped aside. The room was larger than Joy's apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows, a bed that looked like it had never experienced the specific indignity of a fitted sheet that wouldn't stay on. Fresh flowers on the dresser. Joy stood in the doorway and felt something she hadn't expected. Not awe, not comfort, but a deep and complicated grief for every year she'd spent making a smaller space work, because this kind of space had simply never been an option. She stepped inside and sat on the edge of the bed. You okay? Marcus asked from the doorway. Fine. You don't look fine. I look exactly how I feel, and I feel fine. Marcus sat next to her. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Just two people who had shared a 2-bedroom apartment and a broken radiator, and every kind of hard for the better part of a decade, sitting on the edge of something that didn't belong to them. Dad would have had something to say about this room, Marcus said eventually. Joy looked at the ceiling. He would have found something wrong with it, said the windows were drafty, said the flowers were the wrong kind, said the bed was too soft. He always said beds were too soft. They sat with that for a moment, the specific warmth of remembering someone stubborn. What's the plan? Marcus asked. The plan, Joy said, is that you stay in this room, go to class, do not ask questions, do not go exploring, and act like none of this is as strange as it is. And you, Joy stood up, I'm going to figure out exactly what we walked into. Dinner at 7 meant something different in this house than it meant anywhere Joy had ever eaten. The table seated 12. There were 4 of them. Joy, Marcus, Yangun, and Minjun, and the distance between the table settings felt like a statement. Fine china. Actual silverware with actual weight. A server who appeared and disappeared with the timing of a stage performer. Minjun was already seated when Joy arrived. He looked up when she walked in and something in his expression shifted. The careful blankness that he seemed to carry as a default cracking just slightly, the way a window cracks before it opens. Joy, he said, with the precise formality of a child who had been taught how to greet adults at a table. Hey, Minjun, she sat across from him. How are you doing? I am well, thank you. He paused. You came. I said I would. He looked down at his plate. People say things. Joy looked at this boy, this small, formal, quietly heartbroken boy, and made a silent promise to whoever was listening that she was going to find every single person responsible for putting that particular sentence in a 7-year-old's mouth. Yang Yun arrived exactly at 7, not 7:01, not 6:58, 7. He sat at the head of the table with the ease of someone who had never questioned where they belonged, glanced once at Joy, once at Marcus, and unfolded his napkin. Marcus was staring at the array of forks beside his plate with the expression of a man diffusing something. Joy kicked him under the table. He grabbed the outermost fork without looking up. Joy closed her eyes briefly. Mr. Washington, Yang Yun said. Marcus looked up. Sir, your sister tells me you're studying engineering. Marcus blinked. Apparently he'd expected anything except a normal sentence. Civil. Yeah, 2nd year. Your university has an excellent infrastructure program. You know it? I funded the new lab building. Silence. Marcus turned very slowly to look at Joy. Joy kept her eyes on her plate. Yeah, Marcus managed. That's a good lab. I'm glad you find it useful. Yangun said it without irony, which somehow made it worse. Minjun, across the table, was watching this exchange with bright, interested eyes. He leaned slightly toward Joy and said, in a stage whisper that was not actually a whisper at all, Father does that. He knows things about people. Minjun, Yangun said without looking up, I'm just explaining. I know what you're doing. Minjun straightened up and returned to his soup with dignity. Joy pressed her lips together to keep from smiling. She started noticing things by the 3rd day. That was the thing about 11 years of waitressing that nobody gave you credit for. It rewired you. You learned to read a room the way other people read text. Posture, timing, eye contact, the tiny hesitations before someone said something that wasn't entirely true. You learned who was comfortable and who was performing comfort. You learned whose smile reached their eyes and whose stopped at the mouth. Yang Yun's estate had 14 staff members. Joy had cataloged all of them within 36 hours. Not deliberately, just the way you breathe. Just the habit of someone who had spent over a decade making sure every person in a room had what they needed. Most of them were exactly what they appeared to be: loyal, professional, careful. People who had been with Yang Yun long enough that their respect for him had calcified into something that looked like genuine devotion. But there were two who bothered her. The first was a groundskeeper named Lim, who took his phone into the garden shed every afternoon at 2 and stayed for exactly 11 minutes. Every day, same time, same duration. People on personal calls were irregular. They ran long, they cut short, they laughed, or they argued. 11 minutes, precise, daily, was not personal. The second was Park Sung-jin, Yang Eun's right-hand man. She'd been introduced to him on the first day, tall, polished, maybe 40, with the easy authority of someone who had been trusted for a long time and knew it. He managed Yang Eun's schedule, his security rotations, his communications. He was in every room where decisions were made, and he moved through the estate like someone who owned it slightly more than he should. He was never rude to Joy, never hostile. He was perfectly, professionally pleasant, in the way a locked door is pleasant when it hasn't been tried yet. But she watched him. On the fourth day, she found out why the boy was being targeted. She wasn't supposed to know. She'd been bringing Minjun his afternoon snack. He had decided, with the complete confidence of someone who has never been told no about food, that he preferred her to bring it rather than the kitchen staff, because the kitchen staff don't talk to me while I eat, when she heard voices through the study door that was not quite fully closed. Yang Eun and Sung-jin. She didn't stop. She wasn't the kind of person who stopped at doors. She was going to keep walking. Then she heard the words Daehyun Group and merger, and the boy is the leverage, and her feet stopped without her permission. She stood in the corridor for 4 seconds. Then she continued to Minjun's room, set down his food, sat across from him, and said, as casually as she could manage, "Hey, what do you know about the Daehyun Group?" Minjun looked up from his book, blinked once. "Why?" "Just curious." He studied her with those old eyes. 7 years old and already knowing when an adult was doing the thing where they pretend to be casual. "It's a company," he said carefully. "They want to merge with my father's company. There are a lot of meetings about it." "Do you know why your father doesn't want the merger?" "Because," Minjun said, with the precision of a child who had absorbed dinner table conversations without adults realizing it, "if Daehyun gets control of father's shipping routes, they control everything that moves through them. Father says some things should never be controlled by one person." He paused. "He says it makes them a target and a weapon." Joy looked at this child. 7 years old, in a formal sweater, eating apple slices, explaining corporate power consolidation with the calm of a professor. "Minjun," she said, "has anyone talked to you about staying close to your security detail? Not wandering?" He nodded. "Since the parking lot." "Good." She held his gaze. "I need you to keep doing that, not because I'm scared, but because I'm paying attention, and until I'm done paying attention, I need to know where you are." Minjun looked at her seriously. "Are we in danger?" Joy didn't insult him with a comfortable lie. "I don't know yet," she said, "but I'm going to find out, okay?" He nodded once. Then he held out an apple slice. She took it. She went to Yang Eun that evening. He was in the study. The same one, the door closed all the way this time. She knocked twice. "Come in." She entered, closed the door behind her, and stood in front of his desk without sitting down because sitting down felt like accepting the terms of a conversation she hadn't agreed to yet. "I need to talk to you about the merger," she said. Yang Eun set down his pen. He looked at her for a long moment, the measuring look, the one she was starting to recognize as his version of deciding how much to say. "You were listening at the door," he said. "The door was open." It was not open. It was not fully closed. A pause. That is a distinction without a difference. "It is the distinction between eavesdropping and accidentally overhearing something," Joy said. "I need to know what we're actually dealing with. Daehyun wants the merger. You're blocking it, and they've decided that Minjun is the pressure point." She paused. "How long has this been going on?" Yang Yun was quiet for a moment. Then he gestured toward the chair across from his desk. Joy sat. Daehyun has been attempting the merger for 14 months, he said. When legal approaches failed, they escalated. 3 months ago, I began receiving communications that were not entirely professional in nature. 1 month ago, my security chief intercepted a contracted team surveilling the estate. The men from the parking lot. A separate unit. Daehyun has resources, he paused. The parking lot was meant to be quiet, a distraction. Minjun was not supposed to be harmed. They wanted him taken somewhere I could be pressured. Joy felt the familiar cold move through her. They were going to use a child to back you into signing a business deal. Yes, that is... She stopped, chose a word. Monstrous. Yes. And you're telling me this now because... Because, Young-un said. You asked, and because you are, apparently, the only person in this house who noticed that Lim has been making structured communications from the garden shed every afternoon at 2. Joy went still. You knew, she said. I suspected. How long? 10 days. And you didn't. He is not the one I needed. Yang Yun held her gaze. Lim is a messenger. I need to know who inside this house he is messaging for. The silence in the room changed quality. Joy felt the shape of what he wasn't saying arrange itself in front of her, like furniture in a dark room, each piece becoming visible as her eyes adjusted. It's someone with authority, she said slowly. Someone with access to your schedule, your security rotations. Yang Yun said nothing. Someone who was in that study today when you were talking about the merger. Yang Eun's jaw was very still. Joy thought about Park Sung-jin, about the way he moved through the estate like someone who owned it slightly more than he should, about the way he had looked at her, that first day, not hostile, just assessing, the way you assess something that has appeared in a place where it might cause complications. It's Sung-jin, she said. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. What makes you say that? Yang Yun's voice was careful, controlled, but something underneath it had changed. A tension, like a wire pulled one turn too tight. He knew Minjun was at the diner that night, Joy said. You told me you had reduced the security detail because Minjun wanted a normal evening, but someone had to tell the contractors where to find him. Someone who knew the schedule change. She paused. Who knew about the schedule change? Yang Yun said nothing, but his hands, flat on the desk, pressed down slightly. A man holding himself very still. Yang Yun. She hadn't used his name directly before. It landed differently than she expected, not presumptuous, just urgent. Human. How long has Sung-jin been with you? 12 years, he said. And the word 12 did something to his face that Joy recognized, the particular damage of a betrayal you'd been trying not to confirm. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. You may be wrong. I may be, she said, but you don't think I am. A long pause. The clock on the wall marked the seconds. No, Young-un said finally, quietly. I don't. Joy leaned forward. Then we have a problem. Because if Sung-jin is the source, he knows your countermoves before you make them. He knows your security layout. He knows where Minjun sleeps. She paused, letting that land. We need to confirm it, and we need to do it without him knowing we're looking. Yang En looked at her across the desk. You, he said, came to this house as someone to be protected. Yeah, well. Joy sat back. I don't really do that well. Another one of those almost smiles, the ones that lasted half a second and left her wondering if she'd imagined it. I will need to verify it independently, he said. If it is confirmed, he stopped. And for the first time since she'd met him, Joy saw something move through his expression that was not calculation or composure. It was grief, clean and brief and quickly controlled, but real. 12 years. If it is confirmed, we move carefully. We cannot let him know we know. Agreed. And Miss Washington, he paused. Joy, she looked at him. If you are right about this, the danger level in this house changes significantly. If Sung-jin is confirmed, the people he is working for will know their access is about to be cut. They will accelerate. Joy held his gaze. Then we accelerate faster, she said. She stood up, moved toward the door. Joy? She turned. Yang-eun was looking at her with that focused, precise attention. The look that still felt like being seen by something that missed nothing. Minjun told me this evening that you are the only adult who has ever told him the truth about whether or not things are dangerous. Joy was quiet. He said it like it was a gift, Yang-eun said. She stood in the doorway for a moment, her hand on the frame. It should be the minimum, she said. Not a gift, just the minimum. She walked out. Behind her in the study, Cho Young-yoon sat in silence for a long time, 12 years. A man he had trusted with everything, with his son's location, with the architecture of his entire operation, and it had taken a waitress from the Golden Spoon 3 days to see it. He looked at his hands on the desk. Then he picked up a phone, not the one Sungjin had access to, and made a call. Down the corridor, Joy stopped outside Minjun's room and listened. Quiet breathing, peaceful, safe. She stood there for just a moment, hand resting flat against the door, feeling the solid wood beneath her palm. Then she pushed off the wall, squared her shoulders, and went to find out how deep the betrayal went. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you and find out just how far this story has reached. Every single comment lets me know someone out there is holding their breath right along with us. Don't miss what comes next. The confirmation came at 2:07 in the afternoon, and it came from a butterscotch candy. Not literally, but close enough. Joy had been watching Lim for 6 days, not following him, not confronting him, just doing what 11 years of waitressing had trained her to do. Being present in ways that didn't announce themselves, refilling water glasses, folding napkins near windows, existing in background positions that gave her a full view of the room. On the 6th day, she watched Sungjin pass Lim in the corridor outside the kitchen. Nothing dramatic, no exchanged envelope, no whispered meeting. Just two men walking past each other, and Sungjin's left hand dropping briefly to his side as Lim's shoulder passed within inches of it. A folded slip of paper changed hands in under a second. Joy was carrying a tray of Minjun's afternoon snacks at the time. She kept walking, kept her face neutral, set the tray down in Minjun's room, sat across from him, and said with complete calm, "Can I borrow your phone?" Minjun looked up. "The emergency one?" "No, the regular one. I need to show your father something, and I'd rather not walk past Sungjin to get to him." Minjun did not ask questions. He reached into his desk drawer and handed her a tablet without a word. Joy typed a message to the private number Yang Yun had given her. "It's confirmed. Lim to Sungjin. Paper exchange. East Corridor, 207. I need you to look at your security rotation for tomorrow. I think they're being told when the gaps are." The response came in 40 seconds. "I see it. Meet me in the garden. Sungjin believes I am on a call until 4. Joy handed the tablet back to Minjun. He was watching her with those careful, ancient eyes. "Joy," he said. "Yeah. Is it Sungjin?" She looked at him, thought about lying, remembered what Yang Eun had told her, that Minjun had said the truth felt like a gift. Decided that a 7-year-old who had survived what this one had survived deserved better than comfortable fiction. "We think so," she said. "Your father is handling it." Minjun nodded slowly. He looked down at his hands for a moment, small hands, still a child's hands despite everything, and then he said, very quietly, "He used to bring me hot chocolate when I had bad dreams. Sungjin did, when I was little and father was traveling." Joy said nothing, just let that sit in the air between them. "People are complicated," she said finally. "Father says people are either loyal or they're not. There's no in between." "Your father isn't wrong," Joy said, "but sometimes people start loyal and get lost somewhere in the middle. That's not your fault, and it's not his fault either." She paused. "It's just what happened." Minjun absorbed this with the solemnity of someone filing it away for later. Then he held out an apple slice. Joy took it. In the garden, Yang-eun was already moving. Not dramatically, not the way movies showed powerful men moving when their plans accelerated. Just a quiet, controlled efficiency, the way water moves when it finds a new channel. He was standing near the far wall when Joy arrived, his back to the house, his voice too low to carry. He finished the call and turned. "Sungjin has been coordinating with Daehyun's logistics team for at least 3 weeks, he said. "Possibly longer. The security rotation gaps he's been feeding them correspond with 6 windows across the past month." 6 windows, Joy said. "How many did they use?" 1. The parking lot. A pause. "They are saving the others." "For what?" Yang-eun looked at her. "They need Minjun. The merger requires my signature, and I will not give it under any circumstances except one." He stopped. Joy waited. "If my son is not safe," he said, "I will sign anything." The garden was very quiet. "Is that they know that?" Joy said. "Yes." And Sungjin told them. "Yes." Joy turned this over. 6 windows, 1 used, 5 remaining, and Daehyun now knew that their inside access was close to being burned, which meant they weren't going to wait. "They're going to move soon," she said. Before you can change the rotations, before Sungjin loses his access window, they're going to move within days. That is my assessment also. So what do we do? Yang-eun reached into his jacket and produced a folded document. He held it out. Joy took it and opened it, a floor plan, she realized. Not the estate. Somewhere industrial. Warehouse layout, dock access, cargo container positioning. This is a Daehyun logistics facility, Yang-eun said. South Harbor. They have used it twice before for operations they needed kept off the books. If they take Minjun, he goes there first before any transfer. Joy studied the floor plan. Her eyes moved across it the way they moved across a restaurant layout. Entry points, exit points, lines of sight, the places where people could stand and not be seen. Old habit, useful habit. How do you know this is where they'd take him? Because, Yang Yun said, I have been in that building, a long time ago, when I was not the one with the leverage. Joy looked up at him. He said it without self-pity or drama, just fact, stated clean. A man who had been on the other side of this equation once and had never forgotten the geography. I know another way in, he continued. A maintenance tunnel from the harbor wall. It's not on any public record. Daehyun won't know it exists. He paused. I was going to use it myself. But if I move on the facility while Minjun is inside, they will know I'm coming. Sungjin will tell them. His jaw tightened. I need someone they are not watching. Joy folded the floor plan. She thought about the parking lot, the skillet, the moment her feet moved before her brain caught up. She thought about Minjun holding an apple slice out to her like it was the most natural thing in the world. She thought about Marcus, across the city, going to class in a building Yang-eun had funded, not knowing any of this, and she made a fierce and private promise that it would stay that way. I'll learn the tunnel, she said. She spent 3 days memorizing every inch of that floor plan. Not studying it the way someone studies for a test, sitting at a desk, flipping through notes. The way she memorized things, walking the estate grounds, mentally substituting dock doors for garden gates, container positions for kitchen stations, counting steps between points. The same way she could carry 14 plates and remember every modification on every order without writing anything down. On the second day, she found the detail that mattered. The south loading dock had a weight sensor alarm on the secondary access door, standard in Daehyun's facilities, she'd confirmed by looking up their construction contracts, which were public record because they were a legitimate corporation that had simply decided to use illegitimate methods. The sensor triggered at a specific weight threshold. A grown man triggered it. A woman Joy's size, if she moved correctly, if she timed it, would not. She mentioned this to Yang Yun that evening. He looked at her for a long moment. You looked up their construction contracts, he said. I had time. On what? Minjun's tablet, he offered. Another long pause. My 7-year-old son is lending you his tablet to conduct reconnaissance. He's a very helpful child. Yang Yun sat back in his chair and pressed 2 fingers briefly to the bridge of his nose, the closest thing to exasperation she'd ever seen from him. Joy. I know the building, she said. I know the entry point they won't expect. And I am not going to sit in this estate waiting for something to happen to that boy when I can be useful. She held his gaze. You know I'm right. A long silence. Yes, he said finally. I do. He reached into the desk drawer and placed something on the surface between them, a small, flat drive. Matte black, the kind that looked anonymous enough to be invisible and contained enough to end careers. The insurance, he said. Everything. Daehyun's communications with Sungjin, the contracted operations, the attempted corporate coercion, enough to take them apart legally, publicly, and permanently. He paused. If you get to that building and you find Minjun, you don't need a weapon, Joy. You need this. You walk into that room and you tell them that drive is already uploaded to 3 separate locations on a 6-hour delay. If they don't let him walk out, everything releases. Joy picked up the drive. It was lighter than she expected for something that heavy. And if they don't believe me, they will, Yang Yun said, because they know I would not send someone unprepared. Joy looked at him. You're trusting me with this. You trusted me with your brother's safety, he said simply. It seems fair. She pocketed the drive. That was the night she should have slept and couldn't. She lay on the enormous bed in the East Wing room and stared at the ceiling and thought about her father, about what Mr. Deacon had said, about the way Yang-eun had looked when he'd learned who her father was. She thought about her mother's blue ceramic vase, still in pieces somewhere. She thought about the community center's locked door with the closure notice on it. She thought about the parking lot, the boy in the tailored suit. The moment she'd stepped in front of that laser sight, she'd done it because there was no other option she could live with. Tomorrow would be the same. At 11:14, the following morning, everything moved at once. Joy was in the kitchen with Minjun. He had recently decided that he wanted to learn how to make pancakes, which had resulted in 3 days of batter experiments of varying success, when her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. She answered it on the second ring. Joy. His voice was wrong, too tight, the voice he used when he was trying to sound calm and failing. Joy, there are 2 men outside my lecture hall. Joy went still. Across the counter, Minjun looked up from the bowl he was mixing. She held one finger up, "Give me a second," and turned toward the window. "Describe them," she said, her voice low. "Dark jackets. They've been there since 9. One of them asked the professor if I was in the class." "Marcus, listen to me. Don't go to your car. Don't go anywhere alone. Go to the front desk of the main building and stay there. People around you. Do you hear me?" Joy. "What's Marcus? Front desk. Now." She hung up and was already moving when she turned around and ran directly into Yangun, who had appeared in the kitchen doorway with the phone to his ear and an expression that had hardened into something that was no longer calm, still controlled, but under the control there was something that burned. "They took Minjun's route change," he said. "Sungjin filed a transport request this morning for a medical appointment. I didn't authorize it." His eyes met hers. "I've been trying to reach my security chief for 4 minutes." Joy felt the cold move through her from her sternum outward. "They're splitting your attention," she said. "Your brother. My team is already moving to the university." He was already crossing the kitchen. "They will have Marcus within minutes. But, Joy, I know," she was already untying her apron. "They're using Marcus to freeze you, to make you choose. And while you're choosing, they're moving Minjun." "You don't have to." "Yangun?" She stopped him with his name, the way she'd done in the study. Direct, human, cutting through the armor. "Where is Minjun right now?" A fraction of a second. "The transport vehicle left the estate 7 minutes ago. If Sungjin's information is right, they have a transfer point at the South Harbor. The Daehyun facility." "Yes." Joy picked up her jacket from the chair. The drive was already in the inside pocket. She'd put it there that morning. "Old habit. Everything you need, close to your body." "Send me the tunnel coordinates," she said, "and get to Marcus." "Joy?" He stopped. For a moment, the mask was entirely gone. Not the grief she'd seen briefly before, but something more present. Something that looked almost like fear, which on Cho Yang-yun's face was so foreign it took her a second to name it. "Be careful." "I know the floor plan," she said. "That's not what I meant." She looked at him. Then she walked out. The rain started as Joy reached the harbor. Not a drizzle. Real rain, the kind that turned the world gray and loud and narrowed your visibility to 30 feet in every direction. The harbor smelled of salt and diesel and rust, and the Daehyun facility sat at the end of a service road like something that had been built to disappear. Joy found the harbor wall tunnel entrance exactly where the coordinates placed it. A metal hatch, old, not on any current schematic. She pulled it open, descended into the dark, and moved. The tunnel was narrow and low and smelled of standing water, and Joy moved through it in a crouch, counting her steps the way she'd memorized them. 43 to the first junction, left, 27 to the secondary access point beneath the south dock. She did not have a weapon. She had a flash drive and 11 years of reading rooms and a particular kind of courage that came not from fearlessness, but from having already decided that some things mattered more than being afraid. She came up through the access hatch into a utility corridor that smelled of metal and cold air. She listened. Voices. 2 of them, somewhere to her right. Neither was Minjun's. They were adult, male, professional. She moved left. The south loading bay opened up in front of her. Vast, high-ceilinged, full of stacked containers. And in the center of it, seated on a crate with his hands folded neatly in his lap, and his expression the calibrated blankness of a child who had learned very young how to be still in frightening situations, was Minjun. He was unharmed. He was composed. He looked up when Joy appeared from the corridor shadows, and something in his face, just for a second, broke open with relief before he pulled it back under control. She held one finger to her lips. He nodded once. She was 3 steps into the bay when the lights came on. all of them, simultaneously, flooding the space with harsh industrial light. Miss Washington. The voice came from the mezzanine above the bay floor. Joy stopped, looked up. The man standing at the railing was not someone she recognized. 50s, expensive coat, the kind of face that had spent decades in boardrooms and had the particular emptiness of someone who had outsourced his conscience long ago. Behind him, two men in tactical gear flanked him with the practiced positioning of professionals. Beside her, on the mezzanine level, she registered two more. 4 total, plus the man in the coat. "I have to say," the man said, "I expected Cho Yang-un." "He was busy," Joy said. "Yes, we made sure of that." He looked down at her with the expression of someone genuinely puzzled by an anomaly. "You're the waitress." "I am. You hit one of my contractors with a frying pan." "Skillet," Joy said. "And yes," he tilted his head. "What exactly do you think you're going to accomplish here?" Joy reached into her jacket and held up the drive. The man's expression changed, slightly, the first real movement behind the boardroom blankness. "That drive," Joy said clearly, "contains everything. Every communication between your team and Sungjin, every contracted operation against Cho Yang-yun's family, every financial transfer, every coordination record, every piece of evidence needed to hand Daeun Group's executive board to 3 different jurisdictions." She paused. "It's also already uploaded to 2 external servers on a timer. 6 hours. If I don't enter a code at the end of those 6 hours, everything releases. To every outlet we thought relevant." Silence in the bay. Rain hammered the roof. "You're bluffing," the man said. "Try me," Joy said. Another silence. "Even if that's true," he said, and she could hear him recalculating, "you can't walk out of here with the boy. You have nowhere to go." "I don't need to go anywhere," Joy said. "The code I need to enter in 6 hours. Yang-un has it. If I'm not back, he enters it anyway and sends everything regardless. The drive just speeds it up." She held his gaze. "You built a plan around pressuring one man. You forgot that man sent someone who has nothing left to take." She paused. "I already lost my apartment, my job, my bank account, my community center. Everything you could take from me, your people took 2 weeks ago." She took one step forward. "So what exactly are you planning to threaten me with?" The man was very still. On his crate below the mezzanine, Min-jun was watching Joy with an expression that was no longer composed. That was something fiercer and brighter than composure. Something that looked, if you knew what you were looking for, exactly like his father's eyes when the mask slipped. The man in the coat looked at the drive for a long moment. Then he looked at his men. Then he looked back at Joy. "The Daehyun merger is worth $4 billion, he said. "The community center on Morrow Street is worth more than that," Joy said, "to the people who use it." A long silence. "Walk away," he said finally. "Leave the drive." "The drive releases either way," Joy said. "The only thing you control right now is whether it happens in 6 hours, publicly and messily, or whether it's handed directly to the appropriate authorities quietly as part of a negotiated resolution." She held his gaze. "Cho Yang-yun is a reasonable man when people are honest with him. You've had 14 months to find that out, and you chose this instead." She nodded toward Min-jun. "Let the boy go, and we talk about what a resolution looks like." The rain on the roof was the loudest thing in the building. Then the man in the coat straightened his jacket, made a small gesture to his men, and said, "Take your boy, Miss Washington." Joy walked across the bay floor, crouched in front of Min-jun, and looked at him. "You okay?" she said quietly. "Yes," he said. Then, "You came alone." "I did. Father will be upset about that." "Your father," Joy said, helping him off the crate, "can take it up with me later." Min-jun almost smiled. "He will definitely do that." Joy took his hand and walked him out. Yang-un was waiting at the harbor wall. He had Marcus with him, her brother, unhurt, bewildered, wrapped in someone's jacket, and looking at Joy with an expression that cycled through relief and anger and relief again in the span of 3 seconds. "Joy," Marcus started. "I know," she said. "I'll explain everything." "You'd better explain everything." "Marcus, I said I know." She walked Min-jun to his father. Yang-yun looked at his son for a moment with an expression that was entirely unguarded. Every layer of composure stripped away, leaving something that was just a father looking at his child, whole and safe and present. He crouched down and put his hands on Min-jun's shoulders, and Min-jun, who had been composed and controlled and 7 years old and carrying too much for the entire duration of this nightmare, pressed his face into his father's shoulder. Yang-un closed his eyes. Joy looked away, Behind her, Marcus appeared at her shoulder. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly now. "No." "What happened in there?" "I made an argument," she said. "With what?" Evidence in a very firm tone. Marcus looked at her sideways. "That's it? And the floor plan? I memorized the floor plan." He was quiet for a moment. "Dad would have said something stubborn and wise right now." "Yeah," Joy said. "He would have." The rain was slowing, not stopping, just easing, the way it does when the worst of it has passed and the sky is deciding whether to be done. Behind them, Yang-eun stood up. "Sungjin has been detained," he said, his voice back to its controlled register, but carrying something underneath it. An exhaustion he wasn't quite hiding. "The harbor authority has been contacted. Daehyun's facility will be under review by morning." "And the man in the coat?" Joy asked. "Kang Dae-soo, Daehyun's operations director." A pause. "He will have a complicated few weeks." Joy nodded. Minjin was standing beside his father, holding his hand with both of his, the grip of a child who was letting himself be, briefly, just a child. He looked up at Joy. "Joy," he said. "Yeah." "You said your shield becomes a sword sometimes." She had said that. In the bay, quietly, when she'd been crouching in front of him and checking his hands for any sign of harm. She hadn't expected him to hold on to it. "I did say that. I think," Minjin said seriously, "that yours was always a sword. You just used it gently." Joy looked at this boy for a long moment, then she crouched down to his level, the way she had in the parking lot, the way she had a dozen times over the past weeks. "You," she said, "are going to be extraordinary." Minjin considered this. "Father says the same thing." "Your father," Joy said, "is occasionally right." From above them, Yang-eun made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was the closest thing to one Joy had heard from him. 3 weeks later, Joy stood on the steps of the community center on Morrow Street. The closure notice was gone. The boiler had been replaced, the windows had been fixed, the chess tables her father had built 20 years ago had been refinished. Not replaced, refinished, because someone had understood the difference, and she suspected she knew who. Mr. Deacon was already inside. She could see him through the window, setting up the board for the Tuesday chess club like no time had passed at all, like the world hadn't tilted several times on its axis and landed somewhere entirely new. She had not expected what came next. Yang-eun arrived at 9 in the morning in his charcoal suit, Min-jun beside him in a slightly less formal jacket than usual, a concession she had learned that he had negotiated for himself. Behind Yang-eun was a man Joy didn't recognize, carrying a leather document folder. "You didn't have to come in person," Joy said. "I was in the neighborhood," Yang-eun said. "You're never just in the neighborhood." "No," he agreed. "I am not." The man with the folder opened it and produced a document. Joy looked at it. Then she looked at Yang-eun. "This is a property deed," she said. "Yes, for the whole block." "Yes." Joy looked at the document again. "The address, the full city block, the community center, the lots on either side, the 2 vacant buildings the developers had been attempting to acquire for 18 months. All of it. Her name, listed as the new owner of record. Yang-eun. The developers acquired those lots through a shell company that has since been dissolved as part of the Daehyun resolution," he said, with the tone of someone completing a practical transaction. "The properties reverted. I acquired them, and I am transferring them to you." "This is..." Joy stopped. "This is an entire city block." "Yes. I'm a waitress." "You were a waitress," Yang-eun said. "I believe your current occupation is somewhat more difficult to categorize." Joy looked at the deed in her hands. She thought about her mother, who had kept a ceramic vase on a windowsill for 16 years as evidence that beauty was possible even when everything else was hard. She thought about her father, who had built chess tables for old men in a neighborhood that people with money kept trying to look past. She thought about Marcus, who was on his way right now because she'd told him to come see something she couldn't explain over the phone. She thought about a parking lot and a skillet and a small boy in a tailored suit with ancient eyes. "I can't run a city block," she said. "You ran a full-service diner section alone on a Friday night," Yang-eun said. "A city block will present fewer variables." Joy looked at him. "This doesn't make us even," she said. "No," he agreed. "It does not." A pause. "Minjin wants to know," Yang-eun said carefully, "if the center has a chess club." Joy looked at the window where Mr. Deacon was setting up his board. "Every Tuesday," she said. Yang-eun nodded once. Then he looked at her the way he had in the garden and in the study, and every time the composure had shifted enough to let something real come through, direct, steady, and carrying the weight of someone who did not say things lightly. My father once told me, he said, that the measure of a person is not what they do when there is something to gain, it is what they do when there is everything to lose. He paused. You had everything to lose. You moved anyway. Joy held the deed. She thought about everything it had cost to get to this step. Then she looked up at the community center, her father's center, her neighborhood's center, the thing that had survived every attempt to take it, and she squared her shoulders. Tell Minjun, she said, that Tuesdays at 2 the board is ready. Behind the window, Mr. Deacon looked up and saw her on the steps. He held up a butterscotch candy in greeting. Joy laughed, really laughed, the full, unguarded, unreserved kind. She walked up the steps and opened the door. And that, right there, is where a waitress with a skillet became the most powerful landlord on Morrow Street. Not because she chased power, but because she never once flinched from doing what was right. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, and drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from. I would absolutely love to say hello to you personally. Every single comment lets me know our story has reached someone who needed it. Let's find out just how far we can go together.